Hello my diamonds and welcome to my channel. My name is Biso, otherwise known as Miss X. I speak on all things real estate and self-development. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into real estate and politics. Let's get into it. In less than 2 weeks, South Africans will be heading to the polls to cast their vote in the national elections. This election season has been quite a hot topic on many South African mouths. Here are a few facts. It's been 30 years since our democracy, and we have had the highest number of registered voters, which is 27.7 million, which is about just under 45% of South Africans. But if you look at the youth, right, a lot of them have some contrasting views about this election season. Many of them appear to be quite apathetic. And if you were to question them, a lot of them say they don't know what to vote for, they don't see any hope. So one would actually rather describe them as a bit despondent in regarding to these elections. And then on the other side of the coin, we have those who are quite excited to vote, to cast their vote, to perhaps rather bring about the change in the current state of our country. Mine is not to sway you into a certain direction. I will be just looking at the manifestos of prominent political parties and what they have to say on any policies that affect real estate. Right, first of all we have the current ruling party, the African National Congress. So if you look at just a brief history of the African National Congress, it has been the political party in power since the dawn of South Africa's democracy. The presidential candidate of the African National Congress is our current president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. Right, so before I dive into this, we look at the manifesto of the ANC. It has been divided into various priorities, but the priority of interest to us is the one that speaks on real estate, right? Priority 4, where they say they'll be investing in people, improving access to quality education and health, expanding and ensuring all people have decent housing and basic services, right? So what does this mean? I want to refer you to the Constitution, right? Section 26, subsection 1 of the Constitution says that everyone has the right to have access to adequate housing, and that it is the state that must take legislative and other measures within its available resources to make sure that this has a progressive realization. There is a progressive realization of this right. And I'm quoting here, right? So what have we seen, or what policies are in place currently to ensure that this is in place? So we look at human settlements, right? And when you're speaking about human settlements, right, we currently have what we know as the Reconstruction and Development Program. So these are your RDP, what you would now call them as your RDP houses. So what the ANC says is that they will continue building subsidized housing for vulnerable groups, right? So subsidized housing. It can take, I'd like to say that it can take various approaches. I've seen quite a various approaches in how this policy has been implemented. Number 1, through the RDP program, and number 2, through the financial linked individual subsidy program, which a lot of people call FLISP, right? So what is FLISP? FLIPS is really just a subsidy which allows non-qualifying candidates to qualify for a first home at an affordable rate, right? So they subsidize. So it's a specific income bracket that you should fall into, and you can access that subsidy. Perhaps I'll be doing a video looking at a deep dive into what that process entails and how you can access that subsidy, right? And if I look further into the ANC manifesto, rather the policies that they want to implement, right, they want to now bring in what they call as breaking new ground. And in breaking new ground, it's a different type of, it would be replacing the Reconstruction Development Program with what they call as smart cities. So these smart cities, what is intended is that everyone has easy access to basic services, right? And this is to redress apartheid, spatial planning, right? Yeah, so with the breaking new ground, the standard RDP house would be a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and the bathroom must reside inside the house, and it must have a wash basin, right? So it's quite an improved looking RDP house, and we're leaning more towards a modernized, or rather a better standard of, or rather a better basic standard of living. So this is what I found in the political manifesto. I thought it to be quite interesting. Now, when we talk about will they actually be able to implement this, that's a question for another day. But this is what I found quite interesting in the terms of their real estate. They have also said that they would like to strengthen the regulation of rental prices and protect consumers. They didn't elaborate much on this. I'd be keen to see what the intended plan on this is, because right now the Rental Housing Act, I would say, favors more so the consumer more than the landlord. But I'd be keen to actually dig deep into this and see how it will play out. Should I have more information, I'd probably make another video on that as well. So, that's what I found on the manifesto. And the manifesto is really just a brief document of what they want to implement, should they come or should they remain in power, because you already know that the ANC is already in power, right? So I want to move on from that. So I want to move on and speak about the leading opposition party, which is the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance's presidential candidate is John Steenhuisen. If we look at what they have said in their manifesto, right, they didn't say they want to change anything regarding human settlements, right? However, they do say they want faster delivery of basic housing, and they want to do this through private sector partnerships, right? Why would they say this? It is because we all know that, or maybe if you did not know, the delivery of your RDP houses is experiencing quite a backlog. If you were to apply for an RDP house today, the waiting time, stretches sometimes into years. So what they're basically saying is that they want to fast track this process so that everyone has access to basic housing as per Section 26 of our Constitution. I didn't see anything different, anything innovative, or rather anything to speak much about when we speak about real estate and the Democratic Alliance's manifesto. So with that being said, I am now going to move on to the second leading opposition party, which would be your economic freedom fighters. We know, if looking at the history of the economic freedom fighters, it was started in 2013, when the then president of the ANC Youth League, Julius Malema, was expelled from the ANC, and he decided he was going to start his own party. 10 years later, we now have the economic freedom fighters, which is actually the second leading opposition party, right? So let's see what you can find in the manifesto, right? Let's look at the land question, right? So they believe expropriation of land without compensation, right? They further elaborated on this. They say the EFF will introduce a restriction to foreign land. So let me stop here. Now, I found quite a lot of interesting things in the manifesto relating to real estate. The first, of course, would be the land question, which they say they would be expropriating the land without compensation, right? Let's look at this deeper. So they say the EFF will introduce a restriction of foreign land ownership and use rights, right? So they want to say that if I'm a foreigner, I would be restricted to the amounts of land that I can own in the country. So they say this is because they want to prevent hoarding by billionaires and millionaires of other countries, which is very true. You'd find that a lot of these safaris or these resorts in our country, they actually own the land, and the land is, that hotel or resort is foreign owned. Yeah, but that's probably a video for another day. They say here they would like to introduce limitations on the size of land individuals can own. So not only are they going to restrict ownership to foreign people, but they are going to restrict ownership of land to individuals or South African citizens. And they say that they are going to prioritize young people and women. That is interesting. That is interesting. I would like to see how, or rather what their certain implementation plan on that would be. What I found here was quite innovative, to say the least. Then moving on to human settlements. Right. So with the ANC, remember we said that the ANC wants to bring in a new program, RDP, access to basic housing, and their basic housing is that a standard house must have 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom with a basin, and the toilet must be inside the house. So the EFF says they would like a 3-bedroom. They are going to introduce a 3-bedroom house with a bathroom and a toilet inside the house. Interesting. No comment on that. But what I found to be very interesting is, listen to this. They would like to have a reduction of the 20 to 30-year home loans and reduce it to 10 years. Whew. Now this one is, you have to think about it a bit. All right, this one I had to think about a bit. So what essentially that they're saying, right, the current industry standards is that you pay off your home loan in between 20 or 30 years, or even shorter. But they want to even shorten the period upon which you can pay your home loan to 10 years. That is interesting. I think what the consequence of that, banks are going to probably increase the barrier to entry to own a home, because if now I could take out a home loan for 1 million, let's say my home costs $1 million, I can pay it off in 30 years. So this is an interesting one, because now you're telling me if I could take out a home loan for $1 million, let's say my home is R1 million, and I could pay that off in 30 years, now you're telling me I need to pay it off in 10. I think the banks may increase the barrier to entry of home loans, which will then increase the barrier to entry for home ownership, right? It's interesting. It's an interesting conundrum, because you can today in South Africa take out car financing for a shorter period. I think 72 months. Was that 6 years? Yeah, I think it's 6 years. You can take out a car financing structure and pay that off in 72 months. But that involves fancy things like balloon payments and all of that stuff. So now they're saying they want to shorten the time period upon which you have to pay your home loan. That would have quite interesting adverse effects. I would love to know why this would be the case, or why they want to shorten, because it doesn't expand as to why they want to shorten this period to 10 years. it's interesting. I'd love to see why this is the case. Yeah. And then they say here they will make it illegal for banks to repossess if more than 50% of the debt has been paid. Right. So the current system, if you don't make your regular home pay, your mortgage payments, the bank can repossess the property, right? Because with the current credit system in our country, that specific asset is not completely yours until the last payment has been made, right? So they are saying here they want to make it illegal for banks to repossess property if more than 50% of the debt has been paid. I see the merits of this sort of statement. I see why they would want to do this. However, on the other side of the coin, I think it would exacerbate late payments. So if I have paid 50% of my mortgage, I wouldn't prioritize the payment or finishing off that payment, right? So I think that's the adverse, or rather the other side of that statement. Interesting policy they'd like to introduce. I won't lie, very interesting. I'll give that to them. Then they also say they would like to make it illegal for people to use a house as surety. So what surety is basically, or what we call seeding in an asset, right? When you want to get access to some other kind of debt, but you use a different asset to hold it as surety, saying I'm going to pay this debt, but if I default on this debt, this is then this asset that you can hold onto, right? So now they're saying illegal to use house as surety. Okay, so this could be interpreted differently, right? To use the house as surety. What do they mean? Is it to use their primary residence as surety? Because I mean, if I'm dealing in, my assets are majority properties and all of that, I think they would have to, expand on why this is the case, or what else can people use for surety. Is it not going to be like cars? But I mean, cars are depreciating assets, right? I'd like to see the reasoning behind this. I'd like to see that. So I'm just processing these things as I'm reading them as well. So it's quite interesting. It's a lot of meat that I found with the EFF, right? And now these two contrasting statements they've said here. They will make it illegal to be evicted unless an alternative accommodation has been found, and they will make it illegal to occupy a property unless the person has the consent, right? So I think the current status quo is that a person may not be evicted unless alternative accommodation is found. I can double check that. It's very difficult to evict a tenant in this country, which is why we have such stringent rental application processes. So that's why we want all of those things, because we want it difficult for you to get into a property rather than you having us to take you out of that property, because it's another difficult process. So they're saying it's illegal to occupy the property without consent. So I think these sentences are very contrasting. I mean, they cancel each other out. If it's illegal for me to evict my tenant and I haven't found them alternative accommodation, that tenant is essentially occupying my property without my consent as well. So I think they should just expand on what they mean by these two sentences, because I think they essentially cut each other out. I mean, kudos to the EFF for actually doing, paying some attention to human settlements, what they want to do in terms of the financing plans that they have. quite interesting, I won't lie. They are quite interesting, different from what I have seen. And from there, I would then like to move on to the prominent parties, the newcomers into the political scene. Right, so now we have Umkhonto weSizwe. Umkhonto weSizwe. This is another controversial party, right? It was started last year. On record, it says the founder is Jabulani Khumalo. Jabulani, excuse me. It says on record that the founder is Jabulani Khumalo, but the presidential candidate is Jacob Zuma. But there's a lot of controversy around this party in general. Be it the name, I think they won their case regarding the name and the logo. And I think I think it was highly intentional, right? We all know that Umkhonto weSizwe was the military arm of the ANC back in apartheid times, right? So for them to start a political party called Umkhonto weSizwe, it's very easy for someone to mistaken that as sort of, okay, these are the people who are part of the ANC, whereas the political party has no affiliation to the ANC at all, right? So I think it was very intentional. These political games that politicians play. I mean, this party has been in and out of court, but anyway, I'm going to skip all over that. So Umkhonto weSizwe, right, is contesting in these in these national elections. Let's see what they have, interesting things that they have in their manifesto. Right. The land question, they also believe in expropriation without compensation. Okay. They are quite resolute on that. What was interesting here in the human settlements matter, right? They say they want to establish a housing guarantee scheme, which is modeled by the US. It's Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, I'm not a finance expert here. What they did was basically guarantee the mortgages of people, so they would go around buying the mortgages. Sort of like a real estate investment trust, maybe, in my understanding, so that the lender has a guarantee that this is going to be paid out. So Umkhonto weSizwe say they want to do this, but for basic housing, right? So they want to have this agency which will guarantee the mortgage of people who take out a mortgage in that specific income bracket. It sounds like sort of an NSFAS for home loans. I'm processing this, right? It sort of sounds something like that. And they say the reasoning behind this is that they want to ensure home ownership and construction. If it is the way that I'm processing it, so instead they wouldn't want to subsidize it. They'd want to actually have a guaranteeing agency. I'm not sure how that the sort of the financial implications that on the taxpayer, what the burden of that will be on a taxpayer. Interesting. I'd be interested to hear why such a policy, as opposed to a subsidy. Sorry, my thinking. I'd be interested to hear the reasoning behind this. Interesting, something new. I haven't seen it with other political parties. It's interesting, as I say. Okay. Sounds like they've thought about it. So I'd love to see the reasoning behind it. They also say here they want to develop a fixed rate mortgage market and reduce the interest rate volatility. right? So we all know 2020, the interest rate went down, and then after that it skyrocketed, right? So it has been quite volatile in the past 5 years. So they're saying that they want a fixed rate mortgage and introduce that interest rate volatility. It's interesting. So if it is what I think that they're saying it is, that's all I have to say. It's interesting, right? I mean, kudos to them for thinking out of the box. What would be the implications of a fixed rate mortgage market? I'd love to see. I'd love to see the reasoning. Okay, I see the reasoning behind it. Okay, I'd love for them to expand on what they sort of, how do they envision this to be, right? I'm not a finance expert, right? Nor am I a economic expert. So I think my understanding of the two and the intersection of the two is a bit limited, right? But in my understanding, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'd love to see what the plan on that is, though. It's enough to get me going. Tell me more. And that is it by Umkhondo Wesizwe. And then to the other newcomers, we have Rise Mzansi. This party is, I think, is a bit popular amongst the youth. It was founded in 2023, just like Umkhondo Wesizwe. And the founder, of course, is also the person running for the presidential candidate, if you call it that. Songezo Zibi. Right? Who is Songezo Zibi? He's the former head of comms at Barclays Africa, or formerly known as, not formally known, but to our world it was known as ABSA. He was a senior associate and editor at Financial Mail, and then he also started, they don't say what it is. Is it a company, maybe an NPO called Rivonia Circle? And basically, Rivonia Circle is it's a company, NPO, a movement which allowed the youth to be more participatory. If that's a word. Is that a word? It essentially motivated the youth to be participants of politics, basically. Interesting. So it says he left Rivonia Circle to start Rise Mzansi, which has been gaining quite a lot of momentum, right? So if we look at Rise Mzansi and what they say about anything relating to real estate, so they want to look at land distribution and spatial planning. So what they're looking at is they want to redress the spatial planning which occurred in apartheid. So we know that in apartheid, Black people were really placed quite far from any sort of urban or centers of economic activity. So which is why you find that in today's sort of society, we have to travel. A lot of people have to travel like 3 to 4 hours just to get to work, So it was by design that it was that way. So what Rise Mzansi is basically saying that they want to change that. So now I want to bring in the policy that we spoke about in the ANC. So the ANC also spoke about this, and that they said that they're calling it breaking new ground. This is how they want to address these spatial inequalities, right? Through what they call smart cities. So they want to create spaces where, access to these basic services, centers of economic activity are where the people are. So, okay, that's interesting. That's okay. They're speaking on land distribution and spatial planning. They haven't sort of elaborated what they mean about land distribution. Are they expropriating without compensation? It is silent on that. They say they want to provide green zones. So in property, green fields, green zones, there are two different meanings for those things. So I hope that they were to elaborate on what they actually mean, that they want to provide green zones. By green, do they mean that they want to a sustainable building? They want to implement sustainable building systems of property, or do they want to reconstruct what is already existing or improve what is already existing? So I wish they would have elaborated more on that. And they say here they want to reorientate spatial planning. Okay, they haven't elaborated what they mean by reorientate spatial planning, but I mean it's probably the same as what I mentioned earlier in terms of redressing the inequality that was created by spatial planning. Yeah, that's interesting, by Arise Mzansi. And I wanted to do one for Build One South Africa, but I could not find anything. They're very silent on what they have to say about anything about human settlements or the land issue. If they are not silent, I have not come across any article or any, material on what they say about anything relating to real estate. And I think that I'm going to leave it there. That concludes my analysis, or rather my regurgitation of the most prominent political parties in our country and what they have to say about real estate in the manifestos for the elections which are coming up in less than 2 weeks. I hope if you did not know which party you'd be voting for, and you were interested in real estate, and any of the information that I've relayed to you has made some sort of difference, I think I've made a difference in your life. But I mean, I think a lot of these parties are very silent on these. I don't think real estate and human settlements and the land question is something that is a priority for most of them. I think what's a priority for most political parties is the unemployment crisis that we have in our country, and I think a lot of them, that's sort of their selling point in these elections. So I think that's why I couldn't find information on in a few of their sort of manifestos. But I mean, of the information that I did find, I mean, I learned quite a lot myself. Quite interesting ideas coming out of the EFF, interesting ideas coming out of Umkhonto weSizwe. But again, ideas are ideas unless I can see an implementation plan. An idea is an idea, right? I hope you did enjoy the information that has been relayed in this video. Just to put another disclaimer, I am not affiliated to any political party. I do not endorse any of the political parties that I spoke about here. It was just a regurgitation or relaying a short analysis of their manifestos that I have found online. If you did like this video, I do encourage you to comment, like, share, and if you like the type of content that I do produce, please do subscribe. My name is So, otherwise known as Miss X, and thank you for welcoming me into your space.